We thought Trump's deportation policy was bad enough when he was sending people to a prison in a country they're not even from without due process, or literally ripping children from their mother in an attempt to send them away. But now we find out that Trump is also importing family members of notorious drug cartels. My name is Dina Doll with the MeidasTouch Network. Let's break this down. Now, the only reason we know this, it isn't because of any official statement from the Department of Justice. It's not because they cooperated with their Mexican counterparts. No, it's because of independent journalism. The journalist specifically was Luis Chapo, and he was able to dig into what happened here. And this is why now it's being widely reported in the United States. Evidently, 17 family members of the notorious El Chapo drug cartel leader had crossed into the United States, specifically from Tijuana. They crossed into California. They crossed into California with not even notifying the Mexican prosecutors. And the Mexican president came out and made a statement about the fact of how frustrated that this ally wasn't even notified of this situation. She said in her statement, quote, "We are doing our work to fight drug trafficking. The issue is what information is out there and how do they, the U.S. officials, explain this? They have to give information, because this is what Trump and his allies do, whether or not it's because they are intentionally or just so unqualified and disorganized. They literally don't know how to cooperate with their allies, or more likely, they don't care to cooperate with their allies. But here we are talking about a sovereign country who has their own interest in whether or not to prosecute these individuals. But what happens instead of coordinating with our ally, our neighbor to the south? I mean, didn't Trump say, if you're trying to believe him, right, that here he is trying to, put down the drug cartels, and he's looking for, help from Mexico. But what does he do? It turns around and he stabs him in the back and doesn't even bother to have a conversation with Mexico about whether or not Mexico wants to prosecute these family members. No, instead, they just quietly cross the family members. And where do they bring them? But here in the United States. And do we really are we going to trace these family members? Are we going to trust that these family members are going to be maybe held accountable to themselves, or, anybody else going to be kept safe from them? I mean, the people in charge in this cabinet are showing themselves to be so unqualified. And here they just brought in 17 family members of this notorious drug cartel without even talking to Mexico. And we don't even know why this is happening. And do we really trust that Trump and his really unqualified cabinet is going to be able to handle this in the right way? So basically what it is, this was confirmed. It was confirmed that they crossed over into the United States by the Mexican authority. They said that he said that Garcia Harfuch, he said that yes, they were brought here, but without them being notified in advance. And there's evidently video of them rolling their suitcases across into the United States. Let's just break down what Trump did here, because as we know, Guzman Lopez was one of the brothers who was left to run the Sinaloa cartel after the father, El Chapo, was arrested. And one of the things they're charged with is drug trafficking, smuggling, and things such as fentanyl, which Trump has been out there, saying that this is what he is cracking down on. Trump was evidently going against the drug cartels so much that he designated them terrorist organizations, in part because we think he was trying to do things like maybe use drones in Mexico, things that Secretary Hegseth has threatened, despite the fact that the Mexican president does not want them to go in there and do that. But this is why we saw Trump try to designate them so much. So here we have a situation where Trump, on the one hand, is designating this cartel as a terrorist organization. And then on the other hand, letting in members of this terrorist organization and doing it in an apparent deal in order to perhaps lighten the sentence or in some ways help this drug kingmaker by letting his families in. So more to be revealed about exactly this deal, but it seems that they are basically doing the same thing we have seen them over and over do. We've seen them in one court say that Venezuela is so dangerous that they have to deport people from there to El Salvador prisons. And then on the other hand, say that Venezuelans seeking asylum shouldn't be granted asylum, but should be in fact deported back to Venezuela because they actually is not that dangerous there. I mean, this is what we have seen over and over again, Trump taking these inconsistent positions. And we're seeing it again in real time with then having these family members cross into this country, even though they're apparently members of this terrorist organization, and doing it all in a way to not even cooperate with Mexico, who is at the forefront, in dealing with the cartels there themselves in their country. As I'm getting older, my health and how I take care of my body is becoming much more important. Introducing Qualia Senolytic, the first of its kind formula designed to help your body naturally eliminate sentient cells. Senolytics are a science field revolutionizing human aging. A big culprit behind that middle-aged feeling can be sentient cells, aka zombie cells, that linger in your body after their useful function, wasting your energy and resources. Let me break it down. The accumulation of zombie cells can lead to less energy, slower workout recovery, joint discomfort, and basically feeling old. And Qualia's breakthrough formulation is vegan, non-GMO, and tested by leading scientists. Experience the science of feeling younger. Go to qualialife.com mistrial for up to 50% of your purchase and use code mistrial for an additional 15%. That's qualialife.com/mistrial for an extra 15% off your purchase. Your older self will thank you. And thanks to Qualia for sponsoring this episode. The irony, of course, is that while the DOJ is giving so much due process rights to the brother of El Chapo that they're bringing in 17 of his family members, they're turning around and saying that plane loads, if not hundreds of thousands of immigrants deserve no due process at all. Not only do they not deserve due process, but if you ask for due process for them, then somehow you are on the side of terrorism. Take a listen.
It's got to be extremely discouraging to be one of your constituents. To see you fight for a terrorist like this and not fight for them is extremely alarming to me.
I'm fighting for due process, and that's under the Constitution.
Gentlemen's time has expired.
You should fight for due process.
The fact is, everybody deserves due process. El Chapo's brother deserves due process. Abrego Garcia deserves due process. Everybody else on the planes deserves due process. Not just me saying it. Of course, it's also the Supreme Court saying it. But the bottom line is, let's just get to the heart of it. The reason why they all deserve due process is because they're also subject to our laws. Just like somebody who even was a tourist and came to our country and let's say they robbed a bank, they would be charged with a crime, and as part of being charged with a crime, they would have due process rights. It's not as if somebody is only entitled to due process. They're entitled to due process because they are subject to our laws. Due process is just the foundational part of our laws. It's part of our criminal laws. It's part of our civil law. If you get sued, you have to be served with that complaint. You have a certain amount of days to respond. Otherwise, it's a default judgment. That's due process. If you have a speeding ticket, you get a court hearing. That's due process. If you get a parking ticket, you have an address, you can send an appeal. That's due process. Every time we interact with the law, every time we are subject to the laws, there is due process involved because the law, there is no due process without the law, and there is no law without due process. It is a package, people.
Love this video? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch and help us blow past 1 million followers.